Hello, my name is Andrew Crean,
And my name is Yoseph Tamene. Welcome to Forgetting Paycheck Poverty.
where we will take a closer look at the way the US government is currently measuring poverty and offer a new perspective to measuring poverty in the United States. As we discuss the many variable calculations of poverty in the United States, we'd like for you to keep our central thesis in mind. The current US measure of poverty, in our eyes, is failing to properly recognize many citizens living impoverished lives. By incorporating the capabilities approach in a quantified way, as it is used in the American Human Development Index, we can steer away from an income based poverty measurement and begin to see where people are actually lacking capabilities. But before we talk more about this improved measure of poverty, we need to understand what systems already exist in America.
Let's begin our discussion of poverty with Molly Orshansky, a staff economist at the Social Security Administration and creator of the official poverty measure known as the OPM. It was developed in the mid 1960s. But what is the official poverty measure? To put it simply, the OPM is a basic calculation of the threshold of poverty. The OPM allows the US government to make an official estimate of the number of citizens experiencing poverty in the United States. Because this system was developed in the 1960s, the government has more than 40 years of data to compare using the OPM, allowing us to visualize trends in poverty over time, such as this graph from the UC Davis Center of Poverty Research. As we continue to talk about the OPM, you'll notice that this calculation is very simple, so it's often used as a measure of eligibility for different government assistance programs.
Let's take a look at how simple this calculation truly is. In order to assess if someone is in poverty or falls below the poverty threshold, this threshold must first be established. In the case of the official poverty measure, another number must first be developed, known as the low cost food budget. This is the average cost of a simple nutrition plan for a US citizen. Once this budget has been established, the number is multiplied by 3 to account for additional life expenses, and this becomes the poverty threshold. Like its calculation of the poverty threshold, the OPM's calculation of who falls below the poverty threshold is very simple. There is only one thing considered in the calculation: cash income before taxes. Cash income does include some factors outside of your paycheck, such as child support, social security, and unemployment insurance. But unlike other calculations, the OPM fails to consider income earned as public and employer sponsored benefits, such as SNAP food stamps and other job based health insurances. This limitation of calculation factors is one aspect of the OPM that leads to its surprising simplicity.
Another measurement that the US uses today in combination with the official poverty measure is the supplemental poverty measure.
Due to the increased concern regarding how accurately the OPM measures poverty, the SPM was developed to include more factors and create a more comprehensive view of poverty. The SPM extends the official poverty measure by taking different government programs and in kind benefits, such as nutritional assistance, subsidized housing, and home energy assistance, and including them in the equation. It also deducts the unnecessary expenses for goods and services as well. These include income taxes, childcare expenses, and medical out of pocket costs, known as MOOPs. The OPM's threshold used the cost of a minimum diet multiplied by 3. Similarly, the SPM poverty threshold is calculated as the 33rd percentile of the median of the expenses of food, clothing, shelter, and utilities, known as the FCSU.
To compare the OPM and SPM, let's look at an example. In the example, we have two men. The first one is Bob. Bob earns a stable income that's above average and lives in the city. He has 6 pieces of candy. The other guy is Rob. Rob earns minimum wage and does what he can to get by. He lives in the suburbs where things are not as expensive. He has 3 pieces of candy. For this example, let's assume that the poverty threshold set by the OPM is 4 pieces of candy. So according to the OPM, Rob is living in poverty. Because he falls below the line, Rob is eligible for different government assistance programs. He receives food stamps from the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program worth 1 piece of candy. He also receives housing assistance worth another piece of candy. On the other hand, Bob had unexpected health issues. He spent 1 piece of candy on all his medical bills and prescriptions. He also lives far from work and spends a portion of his income, equivalent to 1 piece of candy, on transportation. In this example, we can see how the OPM misrepresents individuals and inaccurately measures poverty due to its sole account of person's income. If the same calculation was done using the SPM, these additional benefits and expenses are accounted for, thus providing a more precise measure.
Many philosophers recognize that the actual root of poverty is not just a lacking of physical objects like money or food, rather, a deeper lacking of capabilities. This is the foundation of the capabilities approach. Like the OPM, we can begin our discussion of the capabilities approach by talking about its founders, Martha Nussbaum and Amartya Sen. Sen is a world famous philosopher from India, and his work guides the central principles of the capabilities approach. Having experienced the Bengal famine of 1943 at the young age of 9 years old, Sen was inspired to show that famine and poverty are more than just a lacking of physical objects like food or money. Inspired by the work of Sen, many scholars, including Martha Nussbaum, have developed the theory into a more defined conceptual framework.
In order to talk about the capabilities approach, we must first understand some of its main components, functionings and capabilities. Functionings are described by Sen as the beings and doings in one's life. Beings are just as they sound, things that you can be. Some beings include being nourished, being in good health, or being able to receive proper education. Like beings, doings describe themselves with their name. They are things that you can do. Examples of doings include going to the polls, going to the doctors, or even donating money to a charitable cause. Capabilities are the freedoms or abilities we have as humans in order to achieve these functionings in our life. If we look at the example of going to the doctors, this is a functioning, but the fact that we have the opportunity to travel to the doctors is the capability.
Nussbaum defines 10 central capabilities to human life. There are three crucial capabilities to recognize. The first capability is life itself. As humans, we should all have the right to live a full life and not die prematurely. Next, senses, imagination, and thought is described by Nussbaum as being the ability to function in a truly human way. I messed up.
The Human Development Index, or HDI, acts as an example for the quantification of some of the central capabilities previously discussed. The HDI was created by economists looking at the question, how are people doing, instead of how's the economy doing? Three capabilities are assessed in the HDI: life, senses, imagination, and thought, and control over one's material environment. Life is the most crucial of these three components, and the HDI measures life using life expectancy at birth. Next is senses, imagination, and thought, and this is measured using two indicators, both educational degree attainment and school enrollment. Realize that these indicators are specific to the American Human Development Index, and the general index uses only the number of years enrolled in school. The final piece of the calculation is concerned with the capability of control over one's material environment, and it's measured using the median earnings of all citizens aged 16 and above who work part or full-time jobs. Each of these factors can also be filtered through a lens depending on several different factors. Life expectancy varies based on geography even within the United States, so this is considered in the calculation. Gender acts as a filter for education, as this is a variable in the United States for degree attainment after the age of 25. Finally, an ethnicity filter can be applied for income, as the average income based on ethnicity varies in the United States highly. For each factor, an individual index is calculated. Then all three are turned to the composite American HDI.
In an interview on the topic of welfare, Amartya Sen defined poverty in his own words as primarily a deprivation of capability. As we begin to discuss our definition of poverty, we will stress this idea of poverty being a lack of capabilities, not a lack of income.
Like Sen, we chose to define poverty using ideas centered in the capabilities approach. We recognize that on a national level, income cannot be completely removed from the definition of poverty. But like the American HDI, we want to look at more than just a monetary factor as the basis of our poverty threshold. For this reason, we would define poverty as a lack of income or opportunity that results in the deprivation of a capability.
We believe the infrastructure for measuring poverty already exists in the United States. We just need to change where calculations are being used. To keep common calculations for government assistance programs simple, we think that the OPM and SPM can still be used as a cutoff like they are today. Additionally, their calculations are important to our tracking of overall poverty trends, so we would not want to lose them altogether. But our government's official measure of poverty should more closely follow the calculations of the American Human Development Index. This index uses proxies to measure three central capabilities, so it shows us a representation of who is living in our definition of poverty, a lack of income or opportunity that results in the deprivation of a capability.
Thank
Thank
you
you
for
for watching
watching
our
our presentation
presentation
on
on
forgetting
forgetting
paycheck
paycheck
poverty.
poverty.